Will Eisner. I'm Danny Fingeroth. I was a writer and editor at Marvel for many years. I write books about comics. I started writing a book about Stan Lee, and be on the lookout for it in about a year and a half. We have gathered some gentlemen who are big fans of Will Eisner and colleagues of Will Eisner and admirers. Missing Dennis? Who else besides Dennis?
Dennis.
Huh?
Just Dennis.
Just Dennis. Okay, Denis Kitchen
The last card was Jules.
and Jules Feiffer. Well, Jules. So I'm going to have these guys introduce themselves, and then I'm going to play a video from Jules Feiffer. Anyway, but I want to, because you can see we have some technical challenges, I want to start with Jules Feiffer's tribute video to Eisner. But let's have Jeff Smith and Joe Staton introduce themselves. Jeff, and Denis Kitchen's here, so we have a full house.
Hey, Dennis.
Hey, Dennis.
Hey, Jeff.
So Jeff, tell us who you are.
I'm Jeff Smith. I wrote and drew Bone for many years and done some other comics. The first time I met Will Eisner, I hadn't done a comic yet. But I read a story, I read like a Warren magazine, and when I did finally make my first issue of Bone, I wanted to send it to somebody to get a blurb. And I had no idea that Will Eisner was a god in the pantheon. So I just sent it to him because I liked his the way he drew and wrote stories. And he was very cool and sent me back a little blurb saying, go ahead and say this book is great. Use this as advertising, and we were friends from there.
Thank you. And Joe, who are you doing? How you came to be?
Well, I'm actually been drawing comics for like 47 years, something like that, forever. And just lately, last 6 years, I've been doing the Dick Tracy script. And this past year, we did an extended crossover between Dick Tracy and the Spirit. Thanks to Dennis, who set up things like that. And in a way, I kind of personally grew up here. I'm around the guys who read Will, who wrote books about it, know everything. And I'm just a guy who does comics and was really, really impressed with everything Will ever did. So that's my claim up here.
Dennis, tell us your secret origin and your relationship with them.
Tell my work.
Secret origin.
Secret origin story. I was a very young man, younger even than Jeff Smith, and I was at my very first comic convention in 1971 when Phil Sewell was kind of inventing the convention. And I had only been in the business 2 years at a little fledgling underground comics publishing company. And a friend of Will's, a French historian, saw my badge and told me that Mr. Eisner was looking for me. I was sure he had mistaken me for someone else, so I said that you must be mistaken. And he insisted. He took me to Will's hotel suite, and there I was very, very surprised to find out that he was insatiably curious about what underground comics were and what the business model was and so on. And I remember it took me a few moments to realize, wow, I've got a private meeting with Will, and he's not even letting me ask him questions about the Spirit in the old days because he wants to know about how we distribute and how we handle copyrights and all this thing. So it was startling. Only in retrospect did I realize that was typical of Will throughout his life. He was very curious about all manner of things, but especially anything related to innovations in his favorite industry. And so that meeting, surprisingly, ended up being the beginning of a very, very long relationship. And It's hard to find anything negative to say about Will, because professionally, you all know what he's done and how wonderful he is, but on a human level, you couldn't meet a sweeter man. Countless times I was in this convention hall with him trying to get from A to B, and anybody who came up to him, 12-year-old boy, asking for a signature, he'd stop, not only sign, ask the kid questions, and I'd be going, Will, we have, and he'd say, we'll get there. He was just a very sweet, warm, generous man.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm going to get to talk more about that. Jules Feiffer is a name you probably know. He is a screenwriter, playwright, cartoonist, most well known for his weekly strip in the Village Voice and elsewhere called Feiffer. He started out his career as Will's assistant, and my wife and I taped a tribute to Will from Jules a couple months ago in New York. So I'm going to start with that, because I figure I'm going to try to start with the PowerPoint with Will 101 and these guys' favorite images, and then go to the video and go back is the path to madness. So I'm going to let Jules Feiffer do the talking for the next 7 minutes. So you guys are very smart.
One of the things that was so relevant and constant with us in the years that I worked for him was that he drew into the office at all hours young people who were even entering the game or had been in the game and then they were in the game, and he was a magnet. And since I was a kid in the office at the same age as people who were just a bit younger, there I was when Harvey Kurtzman came in and started hanging around, he was nobody. And Wally Wood came in and started hanging around, he was nobody. And there were others. And it was, these guys just loved to be in the atmosphere of Eisner's office. They loved to talk to Will, they loved to talk to me and everybody. They just loved to be in that venue, in that atmosphere. And they knew, despite the people in his office who didn't know because of me, how important this guy was and how important he was to them and what an influence. I mean, at the time that I met Harvey, he was doing Hey Look, that was the only thing he ever did. But when you started a few years later to do his combat series, and you could see the influence of Will's layouts and how Harvey evolved into his own very original, very striking style. It all began with Will, and Will set him off. And he did that with just about everybody he touched. And I'm not even sure Will understood that or knew that. He just liked to talk comics with young people. He never took comics with his staff, which is one of the reasons he hired me, even though I had none of the talents that he needed, was that he could talk comics with me, that I knew a lot of stuff and I knew his stuff, and I loved the business, and I was a fan, and he was a fan. Actually, I remember that drawing. This was not originally the Spirit. This was John Law, a character that Will was trying to sell. Didn't, so we put a mask on him, and there we have it. So I remember that. And I just opened the first story that I wrote.
One of these moments?
Well, it just happened, 10 minutes.
That's the first story you wrote?
That was the first story I wrote.
That's pretty good for a first story.
Well, I had listened to a lot of radio, and all I tried to do was kind of write, not my version of the Spirit story, although I wanted to do that, but kind of do an adaptation of the then very popular radio show Suspense. Mm-hmm. And by that time, in many of the Spirit stories, the Spirit was a walk-on. There were little short stories in which Eisner created other characters and other things and other incidents. And the Spirit might have been there at the beginning and to mop up at the end. But he was kind of the host, the way Ronald Reagan did Death Valley was. And that's exactly what happens in the story of 10 Minutes, which was written about my Bronx neighborhood, with my Bronx neighbors in it, including the guy in the candy store who got shot. because I always hated that guy. And that's the way you get back at things. When I was writing The Spirit and I got mad at Eisner because I felt ignored or overlooked or put down, all of which no doubt I deserved, I would get The Spirit beaten up terribly.
You have one story where...
The crap was not better, and that would make me feel much better about the whole thing. But the remarkable thing about Will as an employer is that he never pulled rank, or seldom pulled rank. He worked co-equals, and when we talked back and forth about story, what I had to say had just as much meaning as what he had to say, and there was no ego or sense of superiority involved in the back and forth in the office that I found. It was with him and with Abe Kenningson, who was doing the lettering during my early stay. It was just back and forth, utilitarian conversation about the form, about what works best here. Everybody's contribution was respected, and things were accepted or rejected, not on the basis of who the boss was, but about what made sense. So in the turning out of the work, there was very little ego or authorial control. Bill was just wanting to turn out the best product, and he didn't care who contributed to it. He has more than one legacy. He brought a respect for story into the comic book form that simply didn't exist before. He brought a level of storytelling, visual storytelling, that prior to him was only seriously connected to the work of Milton Cundiff and Terry McIvers. The two of them, they were not the only two great storyteller cartoonists, but they were the only two great visual storyteller cartoonists who were affected by the movies and put movies on paper, and knew how to use silence, and knew how to use drama, and knew how to use theatricality in their own separate and different ways, but both of them learning totally from cinema and really using the form to invent a new way of seeing a comic strip. And when I graduated just not too many years ago into doing my own graphic novels, I found that, and I still find, working in the form as I do now, that I'm still learning from the lessons I learned from those years working with Will. And more than ever, because I'm working for the first time in these years since I've been in something akin to Will's form, which is very different from what I was doing earlier on. That while I work in that form, there's no way of ignoring his contribution, and as I've said a number of times, every time I do a page, I find him sitting on my shoulder, and I'd be unable to work in this form and expand it and do the things I want without him being there whispering in my ear.
So Jules is referring to, he's wrapping up a trilogy of long-form graphic novels that he started a few years ago. And he had, the first time he's worked really in that form. He's done some long-form works, but we'll talk some more about him. I wanted to subtly work into the show. So this is, so Eisner 101, but I hope you guys will chime in. Can the lights go on like a little bit more than that, or is it all enough? That's good. So I hope you guys chime in. I have one more tribute I did want to read.
One thing, I hate to contradict the great Jules Feiffer, but that's not the John Law image that came a little later. This was too early for John Law.
Okay.
But he was right that Will had a character named John Law that was converted into a spirit story. That was drawn in '48 and didn't appear until 1950 to bring back sans serif sequences.
This is why comics history is very complicated. Mark Evanier did an interview in 1998 with this gentleman that we just lost, Martin Landau, who had started his career as a cartoonist. In that interview, Landau said, Will Eisner was my favorite, and Nick was my other favorite. Those guys had created an entire movie on the page. Eisner's work was amazing. I've never seen a storyboard artist in Hollywood who could be as cinematic as what Eisner did on The Spirit. He was a terrific inspiration, not just to me, but to everyone I knew who drew back then. And when Eisner was told what Landau had said, his reply was, it's a shame we lost him to acting. There are a lot of great actors around, but we could use more great cartoonists. Anyway, that was Will. If you've only seen him with hair, or as the older incarnation, that's Will, I guess, during the hate. Dennis, why don't you say that was? Well, Dennis, any idea when that...
I think that's from some photos that were taken in 1940 at his Tudor City studio in New York. But yeah, everyone he knew back then called him Bill. I found that out when a couple of old timers referred to Bill Eisner, and I thought they were making a mistake. And Will said, "Yeah, back then I was Bill," except in the signature.
I'm curious about the glove he has, the fingerless glove.
What's that? Next thing you know, we'll have an honest. So I'll give a quick Eisner 101. We are celebrating Will's centennial this year. In 1917, World War I was in all the papers. Same for the Russian Revolution. If you went to the movie theater, you would have seen Theater Barra and Cleopatra. Charlie Chaplin made about 40 movies that year. There was a big hit by George M. Cohan over there from the Broadway show. And lower right, there was a very popular show on Broadway called Hamilton. This guy was born the same year. As I'm sure if you walked 2 feet in this convention, you know Jack Kirby was born. John F. Kennedy, also born the same year. Some of Will's influences included L.D. Seeger's Popeye, God's Man by Lyman
Ward.
Yes. And this was the Harvard, Princeton, and Yale of cartoonists in New York. This is the Whitman High School, where Will worked on the yearbook and on the school paper. These are some of his drawings. He had a classmate named Bob Kane. Bill Finger on the right also went a few years earlier to Whitman. Kane told Will that there was need for artists at Wow, What a Magazine. That's a cover that Will did for them. That magazine lasted, 3 issues?
What year was that?
It was like 36, maybe? Dennis, 36?
I think so, yeah. I think there were only 3, as I recall. That's a character named Harry Carey on the cover that he invented in high school.
Apparently they've been someone's been putting up at least a couple of issues of Wow, What a Magazine online, so you can read in context. That was Jerry Iger, who Will became business partners with. They had the Eisner and Iger studio. This is some of the work they did. It was muscled up by William Eisner. Will used a lot of different names. For instance, when they created Sheena, it was by W. Morgan Thomas. I think the reason was to make people think that Eisner and Iger had a whole staff of artists, much larger than they did. Hawks of the Sea was by Willis Renzi, very clever. And Jack Kirby was part of the studio for a time. This is from Eisner's memoir novel called The Dreamer. Also Jack King here. There were comics since the 30s, or since the Egyptian uniform, depending on what point of view you take. But Action Comics and Superman changed everything. And the Register and Tribune syndicate, a small syndicate in the Midwest, wanted a superhero, and they called on Will to create it and package it. And that's where the Spirit came from. That's the very first Spirit splash page. The Spirit became known for its film noir and cinematic storytelling, and its very innovative use of a different logo every issue. This was called the pre-war Spirit. It's a little more I suppose, realistic looking. Eisner went into the Army in World War II, and when he was in the Army, when he started sort of a sub-career, or at some point became the dominant part of his career for a couple of decades, doing training manuals for the Army. After he came out of the service, after the war, is again another creative blossoming with the spirit. Really coming into his own with both the look and feel and the writing and the mood of the spirit. There was a back and forth between the comics creators of that era, especially Will and Kirby. So Mr. Citizen Kane, see this famous shot of the camera coming through the window to have Susan Alexander speaking. Here's a spirit splash from a story called The Job, which you can sort of see echoes that. And on and on. Eisner just this very, very inventive storytelling. This is Will's favorite story of his own, the story of Gerhard Schnabel about a guy who, as a child, finds he can fly, but then is repressed his whole life, and finally decides he's going to go for it and fly, and becomes ironically, an innocent victim of a gun battle between the spirit and the crooks. There's Feiffer, much younger than he was in the video. He started working for Will at age 16. Here's a story called Deadline, in which Feiffer kills Will Eisner. But you have to admit, Will did not draw that flattering portrayal of Feiffer either. So, and this is the story. 10 minutes, Will was that Jules was talking about. What's 10 minutes in a man's life? And that's the candy store owner who indeed gets shot by the desperate young man, and the kid flees. But you can see that Eisner brought a visual storytelling that really unlike anything. Feiffer is instrumental again after Will stopped doing the spirit in 52. Eisner included him very purposefully in the great comic book heroes, where people of my generation, the baby boom generation, were introduced that there was a spirit. And then, for me personally, that great comic book heroes and the Harvey Comics reprints of the spirit were key to finding out who Will the Spirit was. This is a very dark story that reading at 12 kind of blew my mind. It's about murder and revenge and betrayal, and then it gets serious. But it starts out with this guy getting a haircut, and spoiler alert, it turns out that they're both on death row, and the barber is shaking his old friend's head with the electric chair. There's a story called Heat that really captures kind of a slum neighborhood in New York. The spirit is injured, and everybody's life goes on around him, and nobody notices him as he is trying to reclaim to live. And a couple of, again, just some of the wonderful, innovative Will stuff. In 75, I think, Dennis had done some work with Will, and Will did a bunch of reprints with James Warren, but eventually ended up back with Dennis. So maybe you can pick it up here a little. These are some of the covers of the issues he did. Was it always going to be new covers by him? Was that?
Yeah, he volunteered from the beginning. I was thrilled.
And now he had come to you, but then he went warm and then came back to you. I mean, I think his heart was Will Kitchen.
Well, it started with the underground Spirit comics before the magazine, and the first two did so well that they caught Jim Warren's attention. And Jim Warren came to Will and said, look, it's nice what you're doing with this kid in the Midwest, but he said, I can put you on newsstands. We can sell 100,000 copies. And so Will called me and he said, look, I've got a business proposition I can't turn down, but we'll continue to do business, trust me. So that's how it happened. And eventually he wouldn't get along with Jim Warren. Go figure.
And then you did some, you published Spirit New Adventures. What were those?
there were so many artists, that contemporaries who loved Will and his work, and I kept asking Will to let other people play in the sandbox. And at first he was resistant, and finally he got it. And he said, okay, all right. He said, let's see what we can do. So it started out with Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' first reunion after post-Watchmen, and then Neil Gaiman and Eddie Campbell and Mark Schultz, all kinds of people jumped in, and it was a lot of fun. And
that brings to mind the EC comics of the 50s. I assume that cover was purposely done to echo that?
what was the question?
That cover reminds me of the EC comics of the 50s.
Oh, yeah, that one's by Pete Poplasky. Yeah, it does have that kind of look.
That the Spirit managed to end in 52, so he can get to be in any. Will manage to miss a lot of that controversy, which was pretty smart in retrospect. Thank you. Dennis, Jeff, you would ask us to bring up some images of some of your favorite Spirit stories.
Yeah, the Warren magazines that we saw some covers of, I got one of those. Just thought the artwork and the line work was really good. And it had this story in it called Fox at Bay. And it's an interesting story, and especially, I reread it and get ready for this panel. And it's kind of about calculating mass murder. The guy sets himself up in a building, and he's just shooting out the window and just trying to kill as many people as he wants. And he's doing it in a very calculated way. Although that's interesting, that's not what really blew my mind. What blew my mind was that the Spirit, actually go back one page. Not that one, that's right there you go. See, the Spirit is like spying on him. He's closing in that first panel. He's up above the skylight. And the cops are shooting back at the killer, but they accidentally clip the Spirit in the shins, and he falls in. And I was pretty amazed that it's violent, and the Spirit's actually really hurt. So now I go to the next page. Okay. So he's like, look at the trail of blood, he can't walk. And the guy leaves, he thinks, the bad guy thinks Eisner's that the Spirit, he thinks that the Spirit is no real threat, so he leaves him there. But I was just amazed at blood. I mean, there really was hardly ever any blood in any comics I ever read. Spider-Man, I mean, I don't even think they ever got bloody.
You were post-code.
Yeah, well, that's true. So, so this is now, I think this is now the story after that. And Will had, I keep calling him Will. The Spirit has crutches. And I thought, oh, they actually, it's not like just a regular cartoon where it just ends, it goes resets. He had crutches from when he got shot in the leg. And it's even part of the story where some bad guys who have been put in jail by the Spirit before try to take advantage of him, but he uses the crutches to do some gymnastics and beat him up.
Oh, that must be the splash that I put in the wrong order. Or is that
Now this is
the next one?
Yeah, I didn't actually ask for all of this response pages. So that was two separate stories. One was shot, and the second one where he's like, he just has an adventure where he's on crutches. He doesn't want to talk about it. And then I didn't remember this, but there were like two stories in between where he wasn't on crutches. It was just a regular Spirit story. And then it comes back to this one. So now he's back on crutches. And it was pretty serious. I mean, you see, I don't know if you read it, but if you read the doctor's clipboard, the very bottom thing is the recommended treatment, surgery, amputation of the left leg. I was like, whoa. And then it talked about it later on, it saying, if only you had, let your leg heal. And I was like, all of a sudden that made sense, like the two stories where it was back to being normal Spirit stories, and he wasn't on crutches. He didn't let his leg heal, and then it got infected, and then they go through this thing where you start wondering, are they really going to amputate his leg? I actually thought that. I mean, I was 12, but I had never seen this character before. It was my first time. And this is his, go ahead, Danny, keep going. I think that's his girlfriend, is it Ellen? Ellen. And then he also has his like, who the Satin? She was.
Satin was one. Peugeot.
Yeah.
Sans serif.
Sans serif.
Yeah. So these are like the cat women, the bad actor women that he kind of was in love with. They were in love with him, and it's a nice little story where his real girlfriend, the nice girl, and it's a sort of like Betty and Veronica. There you go.
The cop's daughter.
Yeah. So, but then go ahead, Dave. Here's the next one.
Oh, that's the last.
Oh, that's the last one. All right. Well, I did. What happens is, okay, I see what I did. I just use this to represent a bunch of things. See, at the top of the page, the spirit's actually being put to sleep, and the surgery is getting ready to start up. And the two rival girlfriends are working feverishly. There is some potential alternative medicine that they can get him. So they're looking for this guy who has this medicine. And they keep going back to the spirit on the operating table. He falls into sleep. They built this tension.
They built this into the spirit of sleeping kind of story.
Yeah, but the fact that the character progressed, the story grew, story after story. The adventures themselves were all different, but this continuity took place. I have never seen that in any comic book of any kind like that, and that made a big impression on me. And of course, this is the guy that kind of really popularized the graphic novel.
Cool, thank you. And Joe, this is from your spirit of Tracy.
Right.
So tell us how did this happen?
Well, we do a lot of crossovers in Tracy, everything from Little Orphan Annie to Snuffy Smith and Mary Perkins. And our writer, Mike Curtis, his real ambition, since we took it over, was to do the crossover with the other guy in the hat, the spirit. And he was in contact with Dennis. Dennis dealt with who was in charge, and they worked it out for us. And, Mike and I, went back to all the old stuff we had, reprints, and trying to figure out how we were going to. You'll note the spirit is in the sling there. That's something we had to make sure. He has to take a lot of punishment. So that was it. I felt like the spirit has to take punishment, and there has to be a lot of burning. So that was, I think that was my contribution. I loved working on the spirit. He fit into Tracy pretty well, and we had a good time. It seems like we had a good reaction to it.
I think Will would have loved the concept of a crossover, and he was an admirer of Chester Gould, so I don't think he ever would have imagined that characters would have met.
I didn't realize it till later, looking through Paul Evans's book, that there was in fact a daily spirit strip, which Will worked, I think, on a few of the strips, and then decided he wasn't really interested in the daily.
It was too much time. You got to remember, he's already doing a page a day on the Sunday insert, and it just took too much of a toll.
Oh, okay.
And then he went with the army.
One reason you see all these beautiful women in this spirit is Will was constantly working. He confessed to me one time he had no girlfriend in the 1940s because he was working around the clock to meet deadlines.
It's kind of hard to see the rest of the world while you're doing the daily strip. And the insert, the spirit.
The spirit section.
Yeah, the section.
And so, Joe, would you always, when you were sort of fan as a kid, was it sort of a realization of something you had wanted to do for a while?
It never occurred to me. It was strictly Mike Curtis's idea. I mean, I love the spirit. I always just looked to what Will did as a model, but it never occurred to do an actual crossover. But I had been impressed by the spirit since I was a kid. I had the Feiffer book, And that wasn't really what turned me on to the Spirit, because it was a book. It was, as I recall, the paper was glossy and the coloring separations were odd. It was really, although you could tell there was a lot of brilliance on the page, it was hard for me to penetrate the printing process to really understand what was going on there. For me, the approach, the opening to the Spirit of those Harvey reprints, I love those things. I bought those off the stands. I still have them. I have them by my drawing table. I had them out all the time I was doing the crossover, because that was comics. That was 4-color printed cheap paper, like comics are supposed to be. And I really got into the Spirit at that point, and that's the point I was trying to get back to in our crossover.
We're working on a Spirit Bone crossover now.
Tracy is open for other crossovers.
All right.
So the panel is focused on the Spirit, but obviously you can't talk about Will. So we're doing Will 101, of course, 25 years after Into the Spirit and having a very illustrious career in educational and industrial and humor comics. Will had that fateful meeting with Dennis and some other underground cartoonists, and the result of that, with a lot of byways, was his first graphic novel, and what's considered, not the technically first graphic novel, really jump-started and put graphic novels and that term on the map, I think. Contract with God. And then Will went on for the rest of his life and career, which were pretty much the same. He worked up until, about 2 weeks before he died on Maybe Less. So The Heart of the Storm. The plot was his expose of the anti-Semitic tract, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, that he finished just before he passed away. Will also was a teacher at School of Visual Arts and authored a number of very important textbooks. There are Will and Danny Eisner, as many of you may know them from the years here in San Diego. I'll put in a plug for Will Eisner Week, an annual celebration of Will Eisner graphic novels, free speech, and so on. It's around Will's March birthday. If you'd like to do something in your community for Will Eisner Week, have an event related to Will or comics, WillEisnerWeek.com would be the place to go to get more information. And I will end with just the official logo of the Will Eisner Centennial. So that's our journey to the Spirit of Will Eisner. Do you guys have anything that we did not cover, or Feiffer had a chance to talk about Will's legacy? Dennis, Jeff, Joe, legacy, or?
Is there a specific question there?
You have, what is Will's legacy?
Oh, what is Will's legacy? Oh, well, I think you touched on the fact that Contract with God was really the first modern graphic novel that changed our entire history. I think every thinking cartoonist in 1978 saw that and just went, wow, because we were all trapped in the mentality of the stapled pamphlet format. And suddenly here was Will making the book as big as it needed to be to tell us stories. It wasn't in color, it wasn't even in black and white, it was in sepia ink. It had a spine on it, you could put it in a shelf with the other real books, and it's like, it was revolutionary in every sense. Not to mention that these were really dark, heartfelt stories, some semi-autographical elements, but they were stories Will wanted to tell to a peer audience. Prior to this, he felt, he was working in newspapers where you had kids, and was working for the Army where the audience was also a very narrow one. And suddenly, he was speaking to adult intellectuals. And that was a revolutionary thing.
Yeah, I mean,
I always felt like Will, most of my interactions with Will at comic book conventions and stuff Louis was here. And it was his, Neil Gaiman described it as collegial. He really kind of fostered this this attitude of, you know, don't be competitive, help each other. I'm talking about when he's talking to cartoonists and stuff. And of course, he was very helpful in any way he could be if he needed it. And I mean, his legacy for me is he showed me how I want my career to go. I want to keep doing it. I want to keep drawing, and I want to, you know, reach back down and help new people, just like he did. And I thought that was he showed me how to do that. So I'm going to do it.
Thanks, Jim. Joe?
Well, one thing that is kind of odd to think of it as Will's legacy, but also, and I've never talked to the guys involved doing it, but we're all seeing the march, the John Lewis, and that's, you know, it's everywhere now. And I think that could not have existed without Will breaking the way for graphic novels, and in the art, in the actual book, there are things that I see in Will, the way the lettering is incorporated into the drawing to move things along, and where the sounds become part of the drawing. And that was something Will, now I've forgotten the man's name, but Will worked with a really good letterer.
He can.
Right, and just brought the whole design in with the lettering. And I see a lot of that in March. I don't know if it happened directly, but because Will was there, you know, this could happen now. And I think we owe Will a lot of, you know, things that can happen now.
Thank you. We have time for some questions. Please.
Back in the 1990s, I was involved bringing out what we call the Golden Age artists to San Diego Con. Two persons stands out the most to me, who I brought out in the past, who gave Will Eisner a unique experience. The first gentleman was a gentleman named Vince Sullivan, who was the first head editor of DC Comics. Vince was responsible for making the decision for Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's creation of Superman to be published. Also, he gave Bob Kane the right to go ahead with his decision for Batman. And it was my pleasure to go up to Will Eisner, and I said, how do you like to meet the first editor of DC Comics? And that was Vincent Sullivan. I remember Will Eisner's eyes just exploded in amazement to finally meet Vincent Sullivan for the first time. And it was a great moment to see him together for the very first time. And the second moment for me was Mark Evanier asked me to locate another gentleman from Will Eisner's life, and that was Chuck Berdera. And I tracked him down, Chuck Berdera. And so it was the first time in many years to see Chuck Berdera and Will Eisner, who both created Black. So that was a unique moment. Jack? So those are some of my memories of Will Eisner.
Anybody have a
Great.
question?
Thanks.
Yes.
One, I wonder if you have any kids, and two, you talked about a lot of like darker, more serious things. So I wonder if there are any times that stick out for any of you that he cracked you up and made you laugh.
Oh, that's fun. Well, then, you can address Eisner's kids, Eisner's children.
I think on that.
Well, I mean, Contract with God will, confess later in his life that it was, I don't know, inspired is the right word, but as a result of his daughter's death at age 16 leukemia. So that was, Contract with God was about a guy about a Jewish guy who loses his daughter and poses in question his whole belief system.
That's a funny story?
Yeah, that's
No. He has two questions.
In real life,
His first question was where were his kids?
He was a very funny guy. I mean, he was I can't even picture him not smiling. If we were out going to dinner or something like that, and was there. He was always laughing. Like, he wasn't a heavy dude. And I think his stories often had humorous, sometimes dark, little twists. There were little goofy moments and ironic twists that I thought were pretty funny.
I'll tell you one good funny story. The gentleman in the front just talked about old timers, and he mentioned Bob Kane. Whatever year the first Batman movie came out, and Bob Kane came out of the shadows and was doing something at a convention, and happened to be at a booth right next to my kitchen sink booth, and I had Will signing with only one of those cloth barriers separating him from Bob Kane signing a few feet away. And as soon as there was a break, Bob Kane leaned over and he said, "Will, it's been years, we gotta get together. You know, right after the convention's over, let's meet at the bar." So Will, "You bet, Bob, let's do that." So the show ended, and as Will was dutifully heading toward the bar, he turned to me and he said, "In 15 minutes, I have a very important call." I went to the bar and I said, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Kane, but Will, we got a crisis here to deal with." So he said his goodbyes to Bob as we're walking out. He said, 15 minutes with that man is all I can tolerate.
Some of my favorite covers in the early 40s weren't drawn by Will, but they were designed by Will Eisner. And maybe it's Jules Feiffer. Can we talk about artists who maybe they have the time to do the work, but he lay it out for them? Maybe.
You don't think that covers Will?
Question was a cover, if you want to talk about covers by his associates? Or?
Yeah, like some new Fine covers, you do them, but Will Eisner laid them out.
Yeah, they collaborated in ways we'll probably never totally know, but it was the nature of the bullpen back then. Lou Fine was one of Will's favorite artists. He greatly admired Lou, and he thought he was the top draftsman in the studio. Thought he was the consummate brush man.
One last question, yes?
Yeah.
The Comics Journal wrote a critique of the Dreamer, I think, which was kind of harsh on him. What was Will's reaction?
Well,
How did Will like that review?
Will and Gary Groth had a bit of an adversarial relationship, so I'm not sure it was, something to talk about here. But yeah, Gary could be very harsh and, stated his opinion. I mean, everyone likes good reviews, but I think, Will rolled with the punches, and it was his opinion. The Comics Journal wasn't the end-all and be-all, what's good and what's not. I think it was the building, though, not the Dreamer that day.
Well, I think it was questioning things like, in the Dreamer, he praised the creator of this idealistic guy making his way in the world. And I think that Grove's point was that he was a businessman who was doing to people under him what, businessmen supposed to do to creators.
Right.
That's really, tough stuff.
We can talk in the hall.
I think we have run out of time, so thank you, Dennis. Yeah, sure. Thank you.